This presentation was prepared for the Society for Czechoslovak Philately by Ludwig Svoboda, past president, and currently editor of its periodical, The Czechoslovak Specialist. The presentation title is Czechoslovak Philately. It is intended to give you an appreciation for the breadth and depth of this topic, and is broken into these 5 time periods: pre-independence before October 1918, the First Czechoslovak Republic, the World War II era, the Second Czechoslovak Republic, and the present Czech and Slovak republics. But before we start, I would like to draw your attention to these national emblems of Czechoslovakia: its flag, the grand arms of Czechoslovakia, the standard arms, and the small arms. Looking at the standard arms, we see the emblems of the various states of the original Czechoslovakia. Going clockwise, starting in the upper right, we see the coat of arms showing the bear of Carpatho-Ukraine, the black eagle of Silesia, the checkerboard eagle of Moravia, the double-barred patriarchal cross of Slovakia, and in the middle the two-tailed lion of Bohemia. In the grand arms we see essentially the standard one bracketed by Bohemian lions with a banner stating Pravda vítězí, the truth will prevail, and linden leaves. The linden is the national tree. The linden leaves and these emblems are often featured on Czechoslovak stamps. Because this is a chronological presentation, the title suggests that our story would begin with the establishment of Czechoslovakia on October 28, 1918, and end in 1993 with a division of the country into the Czech and Slovak republics. In fact, it is a bit broader and longer than you might think, because we are really talking about the philately of the land areas now occupied by the Czech and Slovak republics, as well as adjacent areas, such as the Carpatho-Ukraine, that were once part of Czechoslovakia. To give you a quick feel for some of the philately that is involved in these areas, here are some examples of the kinds of philatelic material associated with them. Here is a folded letter dated December 4th, 1714, from the Chancellor of the Royal Court, Brno, instructing Baron Maximilian Zieletsky to pay a debt of 200 gulden within 14 days. The dry seal of Czech King Karel II sealed the letter. He reigned from 1711 to 1740. He was also the Holy Roman Emperor Karl VI, King of Hungary, Margrave of Moravia, etc. Here is a folded stampless letter from Brunn or Brno from 1853 and a postcard from Olmütz or Olomouc dated 1900 with Austrian franking going to California, with a Hamburg, New York ship transit cancel. Here is a Red Cross prisoner of war card from Tashkent dated 1916 going to the Czech lands showing Russian and Austrian censor marks. Then a Russian prisoner of war card from a Czech named Zapletal at camp number 518 going to Praha or Prague. And finally, a Czech soldier, Jan Zvonar, serving in the Hungarian arena, sending a postcard to Prague. The card has Hungarian franking, a red censor marking, and is dated 1915. This is a Panamanian tourist postcard from a Czech legionnaire while transiting the Panama Canal in 1920 on his way home from Siberia. Then a postcard from a Czech Siberian legionnaire in 1920 containing stamps from both legion issues going to Silesia. And finally, a postcard, again from 1920, from Trština in eastern Silesia, with eastern Silesian franking going to Bratislava. Here are field postcards, one from 1919 going to Železný Brod, and another from 1938 going to Turčianský Svatý Martin in Slovakia. And finally, a mixed franking Austrian registered postcard from 1919 going from Carlsbad to Denmark, up-franked with a cross-use special delivery stamp, and then Czech Hračany issue franking to cover the registration cost. Here are two envelope examples reflecting the effects of the German takeover of Czechoslovakia in 1938 and 1939. Here is shown a registered personal delivery letter of Bohemian Moravia going from Prague to Rakovník, and then a Czech forces in Great Britain registered field post letter. Both are from 1942. We see here an envelope bearing Czech stamps overprinted Slovenský štát 1939, along with the first Slovak issue from April 1939. And finally, here is a letter sent from the USA in 1960 to communist Czechoslovakia that was not allowed in and was returned because it bore the two Masaryk Champions of Liberty stamps. The communists censored all incoming mail, even to the extent that if the stamps used told something they did not want the people to even think about, like here Masaryk, the first president who had brought freedom to the people, they would not let it in. The envelope is proof of that paranoia. Collectors can specialize in any of these areas while collecting Czechoslovak philately. In addition, Czechoslovakia offers many topical collector opportunities on their stamps that are richer and, many believe, more beautiful than others because they were and still are produced utilizing the engraving process. Now, the pre-independence period, which is before October 1918. Czechoslovakia was one of the new states which grew out of the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian, German, Russian, and Ottoman empires at the end of World War I. Czechoslovakia is located in the heart of Europe. This map shows the countries as that they were just prior to the end of World War I. Thus, the Czechoslovak lands are shown as a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. You can see that the country is surrounded by Germany, Poland to be, Romania to be, Hungary to be, and Austria to be. October 28, 1918 was Independence Day for Czechoslovakia. On that day, the Czech National Council, which had been secretly functioning for some time utilizing scouts to deliver mail for security purposes, began functioning as the provisional government in Prague. The authority of the new government eventually spread to the provinces of Bohemia, Moravia, most of Austrian Silesia, Slovakia, and Carpatho-Ukraine, or Subcarpathian Rus. This map indicates the geographical contiguity of the 5 provinces that are represented in the Grand Arms and Standard Arms of Czechoslovakia following independence. Now a little appropriate history is in order. As a political entity, the Czechoslovak Republic was an experiment that combined lands formerly a part of the Kingdom of Hungary with lands formerly part of the Austrian Empire. The history of the Czechs and Slovaks in Central Europe goes back some 1,500 years. However, before 1918, for 300 years and 1,000 years respectively, the lands of the Czechs and Slovaks were ruled by different political entities. For example, Just prior to 900 AD, the Slovaks began being ruled by the Hungarians, regardless of whether the Hungarian capital was located in Budapest or Pozsony, Bratislava. Slovakia was often called Upper or Northern Hungary. The Slovaks remained under Hungarian domination until 1918, all of 1,000 years later. Meanwhile, by the 13th century, independent Bohemia had developed into a kingdom to which was attached Moravia and eventually Silesia. The three of them then became what is called the Czech lands. This kingdom was, at one time, one of the great major powers within the Holy Roman Empire. However, in 1620, at the start of the 30 Years' War, as a result of the Battle of White Mountain, the lands lost their independence when the Bohemian crown became a hereditary possession of the Austrian Habsburgs. The Austrian emperor then assumed the titles of King of Bohemia, Margrave of Moravia, and Duke of Upper and Lower Silesia. The Austrian emperor was also King of Hungary. In the 18th century, most of Silesia was lost to Prussia. However, the parts of Silesia directly abutting Moravia remained in Habsburg's hands as Austrian Silesia. Thus, for 300 years, until 1918, the Czech lands were administered and ruled from Vienna. As World War I dragged on, the Allies and President Wilson decided to let the various ethnic groups in the Austro-Hungarian Empire develop their own nation-states. Czechs and Slovaks in both Europe and North America began negotiations for forming Czechoslovakia, to which was added the Carpatho-Ukraine. As World War I wound down, considerable chaos developed in Central Europe amid the attempts to draw new political boundaries based on ethnicity, historic rights, economics, and defendable borders. The borders of the First Czechoslovak Republic were finally established in 1923. This republic had minority problems from the very beginning, and in this respect was a microcosm of Austria-Hungary. In the 1921 census, based on language spoken, Czechs made up 43% of the population, Germans 23%, Slovaks 22%, and Hungarians 5%. The remaining 5% spoke Russian, Polish, and other languages. This map shows where the preponderance of German-speaking people lived, the blue, Hungarian speakers lived, the green, and Polish speakers lived, the red. There were some very interesting philatelic happenings at the time of the establishment of the First Republic. On October 28, 1918, in order to help provide secure communications, the Czech National Council began utilizing the services of Czech Boy Scouts to carry mail and telegrams between council members and other offices of the new government. For this purpose, the National Council commissioned the production and use of 2 stamps. This slide shows an example of each stamp on cover. The first line of the hand stamp holds the name or symbol to identify the scout that delivered the cover, with a second line showing the signature of the recipient. The date is in the circular cancel. The second cover is addressed to Military Hospital No. 2 in Prague. During the deliberations by the Allies as to the division of Silesia between the competing factions, both Czechoslovakia and Poland moved troops into the contested areas and organized postal services for which overprinted Czechoslovak and Polish stamps were produced and used in an effort to consolidate each country's claim. These 2 covers show the SO 1920 overprint, SO being Silesia Orientalis or Silesia Eastern, on Czech and Polish stamps. German speakers in southern Moravia attempted to have their area annexed into Austria. One scheme they used was to overprint Austrian stamps with Deutsch Österreich, German Austria, and then to use them in a short-lived political entity of about 710 square miles called German South Moravia, or Deutsch Südmähren. That was October 27, 1918 through 17 December 1918. About 2 months. The first cover shown contains an Austrian stamp overprinted with Deutsch Österreich and going from Litomyšl in southern Moravia to Wien or Vienna in early 1919. Likewise, German speakers in northern and western Bohemia tried to annex these areas to Germany or German Austria. They used postmarks of the so-called German Bohemian province, Provinz Deutsch Bohemen, again October 27, 1918 through December 27, 1918. The second cover bears Austrian franking but is cancelled in Wiepert of western Bohemia, that's Wieperty, 2 kilometers from the German border, and is going to a town near Teplitz or Teplice on 2 December 1918. The slide shows the areas that desired to be joined with German Austria or Germany. There were other transitional philatelic items that occurred during these turbulent times when the resources for stamp production of a new country, that is, paper, ink, presses, qualified printers, were largely non-existent due to the very recent resource requirements of World War I. Specific examples of transitional items include the use of Austrian or Hungarian stamps for a limited period of time, bisected Austrian stamps, mixed frankings, nationalized cancels and overprints, and cross-use of designated use stamps. Looking at the First Republic, that's 1918 through 1938, the first stamps of Czechoslovakia were issued between December 18 and December 30, 1918. These were part of the famous Hradčany designed by the well-known Czech Art Nouveau artist Alfons Mucha. The Hradčany issue eventually included 26 values in a great number of color and perforation varieties and 4 design changes. The slide shows all 26 of the Hradčany stamps with them grouped into the 5 designs. They are denominated in hellers or haléřů, where 100 hellers equals 1 crown or koruna, so 100 H equals 1 K. The issue features Hradčany Castle, Prague's most famous landmark, and the seat of power of the Bohemian kings, the Czechoslovak presidents, and the Czech presidents. Behind the castle is a rising sun representing a new dawning for Czechs and Slovaks, although in fact this is not a view of the castle looking east but rather northwest, so it technically cannot be a rising sun. Most of the Hradčany values were issued in large quantities. They are still readily available, and they form the basis of many Czechoslovak collections. Now the 1919 to 1930 years. During this period of time, Czechoslovak philately came into its own. There were 13 definitive issues, 5 semi-postal issues, 2 airmail issues, and in the back of the book, postage due, special delivery, personal delivery, and newspaper stamps. Among the definitive issues are the Peace Dove set of 6 values with color, perforation, and numerical varieties, and the Chainbreaker set of 11 values with perforation and design varieties. As you can see, both of these issues came in Tetbesh and Gutter Tetbesh pairs. Another definitive issue was the beautifully engraved Agriculture and Science set of 6 values in 2 major designs, each with 2 perforation varieties. the second design set with 3 type varieties. The top 2 rows show the first design with both types of the 400 Heller value. Then the 3 of the second design, followed by a blow-up that indicates the changes that distinguish the 3 varieties. The agricultural and science set presents an interesting philatelic challenge in finding the different type and perforation varieties. However, most of the set was issued in large enough numbers to make the hunt worthwhile and possible. This slide shows the marvelous President Masaryk sets done in both photo offset and engraved printing. The first row shows the set dedicated to the 5th anniversary of the founding of Czechoslovakia. Then the second row shows 3 of these values overprinted for the Olympic Congress held in Prague in 1925, and then all 4 of the values overprinted for the 8th Sokol Slet or Rally held in Prague in 1926. The last 4 rows shows various other Masaryk issues from this time period. They provide tremendous philatelic fun dealing with design changes, perforation varieties, and watermarks. The semi-postal issues include 1. The Legionnaires issue on the first line. It is named thus because a portion of the proceeds was to go to the widows and orphans of the Czech and Slovak legionnaires that fought in World War I. This was a very short-lived issue. It was released on October 27, 1919, and demonetized on November 3, 1919, only 1 week later. The set consists of 6 values and 7 perforation varieties. The low values show a lion breaking its chains, and the high values a young mother with baby. The second semi-postal set, issued December 12, 1919, consists of the overprinting of the remaining stocks of Austrian and Hungarian stamps still on hand but no longer valid in the Czechoslovak lands. The overprint reads Pošta Československá 1919. The second and third rows are the Austrian stamps overprinted, while the last 3 rows show the Hungarian overprinted stamps. Altogether, 106 Austrian and Hungarian stamps were overprinted, many in very small quantities. As a result, a few of these are among the most valuable of Czechoslovak stamps. These stamps were valid for postage only through January 31, 1920. Because of this very short period of validity, only 1.5 months, relatively few covers exist. Then there are the Legion Post issues. Czech and Slovak soldiers were organized into legions that fought with the Allies on the Western, Eastern, and Alpine fronts. In the East, after the Bolshevik Revolution, Czechs and Slovaks who were fighting with the Russians against the Germans and Austrians kept their guns and headed east across Siberia to try to come to fight on the Western Front. The Allies decided that the Czechoslovaks should stay in Siberia, in part to prevent German POWs captured by the Tsarist armies from returning to fight on the Western Front after the Germans and Bolsheviks made peace. This Siberian Legion of Czechoslovaks issued its own postage stamps in 2 series. These stamps are listed in Scott as Czechoslovak Legion Post in the back of the book section of Czechoslovakia before Bohemia and Moravia. Then came the 2 airmail issues, which are overprints of 3 values of Hradčany imperforated and perforated stamps, and of 3 values of the agriculture and science set. Both overprints consist of a monoplane, propellers, and a new value. However, the overprints are different in the positions of the propellers and the new values in the last set. The back of the book issues had interesting development also. While the postage due issues had dedicated stamps produced, that is the first row, when the operational needs required an infusion of additional quantities of certain values, expediency dictated that previously issued but no longer valid definitive stamps that were still on hand to be overprinted with new values. Those are rows 2 through 5. Special delivery, triangular personal delivery, newspaper stamps, as well as business printed matter stamps, that's newspaper stamps overprinted OT, were issued. The newspaper stamps, which were also overprinted with new values, were a carryover from Austrian postal practices. Now we have issues of the 1930s. Czechoslovakia issued interesting stamps, the first two stamps shown, that show the standard arms emblem of the provinces, Bohemia, Moravia, Slovakia, Silesia, and Carpathia, Ukraine, that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. They were printed in sheets and also some in coils. Also during this period, there were several series featuring castles, cities, and scenes, plus new Masaryk issues. The stamps honoring Masaryk's 80th birthday in the last row can have top or bottom selvage imprinted with the dates 1850 to 1930. These were the first Czechoslovak stamps to have this type of ornamentation. The stamps honoring the Slovak city of Nitra, a seat of power of the Great Moravian Empire, can be found in rare gutter pairs. About 800 of the 50 Heller were actually but mistakenly sold at post offices, while the extremely rare 1K version was never sold at post offices. The year 1934 saw the issuance of the famous Czechoslovak national anthem sheets, the 1 crown brown red, shown, and 2 crown blue on very thick, ungummed paper. They celebrated the 100th anniversary of the anthem, Kde domov môj, or Where is my home? These were the first Czechoslovak souvenir sheets. The definitive stamps issued at the same time as these sheets were had the first Czechoslovak blank coupons associated with them. Coupons, blank or inscribed, became a staple of many Czechoslovak stamps throughout the rest of the 1930s. The 1930s also saw the first non-overprinted Czechoslovak airmail stamps in 5 designs with 4 perforation varieties. Note that the 30 Heller airmail stamp at the bottom shows the name of the country hyphenated, Česko-Slovensko rather than Československo. More on this hyphenation later. These stamps can very often be found on Zeppelin covers originating from Czechoslovakia. These covers are relatively scarce. This Czechoslovak registered Zeppelin cover goes from Javorník in June 1933 to Brazil, going via the 3rd Graf Zeppelin flight. It is unusual in that it has a receiving cancel on the front as well as the back. Now, examining the World War II era of 1938 to 1945, the rise of Nazism in Germany is reflected in Czechoslovak Philately. In early 1938, Hitler forced the union of Austria to Germany. This union meant Western Czechoslovakia was surrounded by Germany. Throughout 1938, the Germans and the Czechoslovak Republic increased their demands for more autonomy in Czechoslovakia and eventually demanded union with Germany. This German-speaking area formed a rind around Bohemia and Moravia and was collectively called the Sudetenland. It is in blue. Czechoslovakia mobilized to face the Nazi threat. Meanwhile, the leaders of Germany, Italy, Britain, and France, that was Hitler, Mussolini, Chamberlain, and Daladier, respectively, gathered in Munich in late September 1938. Note that Czechoslovakia was excluded from the meeting. They decided what to do about Hitler's agitation. As a result of the Munich Agreement, Czechoslovakia was ordered to cede the Sudetenland to Germany, all that blue area, in just a few days in early October 1938. At the same time, as a result of the weakening of Czechoslovakia's position, Poland took the Czechoslovak portion of eastern Silesia, it's in red, and Hungary was given parts of Slovakia and the Carpatho-Ukraine, the green. In many places, the German speakers overprinted Czechoslovak stamps with new German values, swastikas, the slogan Wir sind frei, or We are free, and many special cancellations. What was left of Czechoslovakia printed stamps on which the name was hyphenated, and each province was to have an autonomous parliament. In addition, stamps were printed celebrating the autonomous parliaments of Slovakia and Carpatho-Ukraine in January and March 1939, respectively. The four on top are hyphenated, while the two on the bottom represent the Slovak and Carpatho-Ukraine parliament issues. Note that the Carpatho-Ukraine one is also hyphenated. On March 15, 1939, the Germans marched into the rump of Bohemian Moravia and made it a protectorate. The Hungarians annexed the Carpatho-Ukraine, its autonomous parliament stamp lasted less than 1 day, and Slovakia declared independence but turned over management of its foreign policy and economy to Germany. Czechoslovakia ceased life as a political unit. One irony in all of this is that the hyphenated Czechoslovak stamps of Masaryk and the 30 Heller airmail were not issued until April 1939. Thus, they are technically issues of Bohemen und Mähren, or Bohemian Moravia. In addition, the hyphenated 50 Heller Hlinka issue ended up being overprinted Slovenský štát 1939. The German occupation lasted 6 years. Initially, stamps of Czechoslovakia were overprinted Bohemen und Mähren on top and Czechia Morava at the bottom for use in the protectorate. That's the top two rows. Soon the Germans were issuing stamps specifically for the protectorate. One of the most famous of the protectorate stamps was that issued to mourn Reinhard Heydrich, the Reichsprotector of Bohemen und Mähren, who was assassinated by Czech soldiers parachuted in from England. The stamp is in the bottom row. In retribution for Heydrich's assassination, Hitler ordered the annihilation of the town of Lidice and most of its people. Less known is a similar fate for the town of Ležáky. This numbered souvenir sheet in a like-numbered envelope was given only to people who attended Heydrich's memorial service. There are so few in circulation, possibly only several hundred, that they carry a very high price. Slovakia, now a puppet state of Germany, overprinted Czechoslovak stamps with Slovenský štát 1939, that's the top row, and soon replaced them with their own stamps specifically for Slovakia. Shown here are several examples. They continued to issue stamps during the war, which ended earlier for them, about March 1945, because of the advance of the Soviet forces from the east. The Red Army began the liberation of Czechoslovakia by entering the Carpatho-Ukraine in October 1944. Initially, the Soviets allowed representatives of the Czechoslovak government in exile in London to return to the Carpatho-Ukraine. However, the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin changed his mind and decided to annex the territory. To legitimize the annexation, the Soviets set up a local government, which then voted for annexation to the Soviet Union. As the Red Army rolled west across Slovakia, Moravia, and eastern Bohemia, General George Patton's U.S. Third Army entered Bohemia from the west. At the end of World War II, the American Army had liberated Karlovy Vary, Plzeň, and much of western and southwestern Bohemia, while the Soviets were reaching Prague. During this exhilarating time, a number of newly liberated towns issued what are called revolutionary stamps and overprints to signify that Czechoslovakia was now free. Many of the overprints were specifically designed to significantly disfigure the image of Hitler. There are literally several hundred different overprints, most of them on stamps, the vast majority of which were never valid for franking. Nevertheless, sometimes post offices in the exhilaration of the moment let them pass through the post. Now we're looking at the Second Republic, 1945 to 1992. As the Allied armies liberated the territory of the Republic, the government in exile was allowed to assume civil administration. By March 1945, eastern Slovakia was secured. On April 3, 1945, President Beneš arrived in the city of Košice. Prior to the president's arrival, on March 26, 1945, the first new Czechoslovak stamps in almost 6 years were issued. These were the so-called Košice issue. These were quickly followed by issues printed in Bratislava, 30th of April, Prague, 23rd of May, Moscow, the 16th of July, and London, the 18th of August. Before the end of 1945, the Soviet-American armies withdrew from Czechoslovakia, and the country struggled to revive a shattered economy and rebuild democratic institutions. Czechoslovak issues of 1945 to 1948 reflect these themes, with stamps honoring traditional issues of St. Adalbert, Jan Hus, T.G. Masaryk, and the rebuilding of the country. Other themes from these post-war years are a semi-postal issue for the repatriation of the Slovaks, the first anniversary of the liberation, and the 5th anniversary of the destruction of the village of Lidice, an anniversary that would be commemorated with a stamp issuance every 5 years thereafter. However, Czechoslovak democracy was soon subverted by communist dictatorship. In elections for the National Assembly in May 1946, the Communists polled the largest number of votes, 38%, largely due to the people remembering the liberation of most of the country by the Russians, the Western Allies stopping their liberation in westernmost Czechoslovakia, and the betrayal at Munich by the West in 1938. New elections were scheduled for May 1948. However, with its popularity slipping, the Czechoslovak Communist Party staged a coup and seized power on 25 February 1948. The coup, which the communists called Victorious February, ushered in a flood of communist propaganda stamps emphasizing President Gottwald, Lenin, Stalin, hard industry, and Russian-Czech cooperation. Along with propaganda stamps, the communists continued to issue stamps that highlighted Czech and Slovak history, culture, architecture, industrial products, flora, fauna, art, space exploration, etc., as shown in these 2 slides. The first crack in the communist hold on Czechoslovakia came in 1968. A group of reformers rose to power in the Czechoslovak Communist Party and attempted to put a human face on one-party rule. This so-called Prague Spring lasted less than 1 year, ending with the Soviet-led Warsaw Pact invasion on 21 August 1968. Although Prague Spring left very little philatelic trace, there were a few political cancels found on the mails. The Warsaw Pact invasion resulted in the suppression of 2 stamps. These 2 stamps were designed to mark the 14th Congress of the Czechoslovak Communist Party, a meeting the reformers held in secret after the Warsaw Pact invasion, much to the displeasure of the Soviets. These two stamps, which were never issued, came to light after the end of communist rule. And that rule came to an end in Czechoslovakia in November 1989, following the fall of the Berlin Wall. The Velvet Revolution, led by Civic Forum and longtime dissident Václav Havel, returned democracy to the country. The political change was reflected in some of the themes which appeared on the new stamps. The first president of the First Republic, T.G. Masaryk, reappeared on stamps, as well as the new president, Václav Havel. Also seen again were leaders of the First Republic: Pope Paul, the Helsinki Accord, Boy Scouts, and the Infant Jesus of Prague. Now, the formation of the Czechoslovak republics in 1993. The Velvet Revolution was followed with a Velvet Divorce. On January 1, 1993, the country divided into the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. The first stamp issued by each of the two new republics featured their coat of arms. Czechoslovakia, and then continuing with the Czech Republic and Slovak republics, have continued to produce some of the most attractive stamps there are, almost all of which are engraved. In closing, it should be emphasized that Czechoslovak Philately offers something for everyone: a classic period, military mail, numerous philatelic upheavals, overprints, airmail, printing of perforation varieties, many topical subjects, and some of the most beautiful art on stamps found anywhere, all featuring stamps that are still engraved. Now for some acknowledgments for those individuals who contributed to this presentation through comments and/or illustrations. They are Tom Kosoboom, Savoy Horvath, Chris Jackson, Lubor Kunz, Frederick Lawrence, Richard Palashak, Phil Rode, Yaroslav Werner, and Mark Wilson. Illustration credits are on the slides.